Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Yesterday we talked about the structure of the PMBOK guide 7th edition. So majorly it has three sections, right? The first one was the project performance domain. The second one was the tailoring. The third one was methods and artifacts which are commonly used in the project execution or planning, whatever it is, right? So what I'm planning now is I'm going to start with project performance domains today. So there are 8 domains being discussed in PMBOK 7th edition. I'm going to talk about a first performance domain, which is stakeholder in detail today. So what I'm planning is one performance domain per day. I'm planning to create a video, right? So today we're going to discuss about stakeholder performance domain. Okay, so let's start the video now. See, these are the 8 performance domains discussed in the PMBOK 7th edition, right? What are the 8 performance domains? As displayed here: stakeholders, team performance domain, development approach or development life cycle domain, planning domain, project work execution domain, delivery domain, measurement, and dealing with uncertainty. These are the 8 domains being discussed in PMBOK 7th edition as part of the PMBOK guide actually. Today we are going to talk about stakeholders domain in detail, right? What is a stakeholder performance domain? What it does? What are things we are going to discuss? The stakeholder performance domain addresses the activities and the functions associated with the stakeholder management, right? So basically it's going to talk about how we are going to identify the stakeholders, what are the ways we are going to engage them and analyze them, how do we prioritize them, how do we monitor the stakeholder, power, different aspects of stakeholder research. If you look at the stakeholder performance domain, there are, if you want to ensure the effective execution of stakeholder performance domain, there are basically 3 desired outcomes you can think of. The first desired outcome for effective execution of stakeholder performance domain is the productive working relationship with stakeholders throughout the project. It's not only the beginning of the project or in the middle of the project or while implementing and executing the project or while closing the project, right? So throughout the project, maintaining a productive working relationship with all the required stakeholders. The second desired outcome will be agreement with project objectives. So we need to agree with objectives of the project with all the required stakeholders. It can be a project sponsor, it can be executive leadership, it can be a project manager, it can be a PMO, it can be team leads, team members, everyone. So we need to get an agreement, bind an agreement with the project objectives, right? So you need to define a vision and mission, create a project charter, and run with these stakeholders and agree on with them. The third desired outcome would be the project beneficiaries who are supportive. We need to ensure them they are satisfied, right? Who are the supportive and who are the beneficiary of this project. So we need to ensure that all the beneficiaries and supportive stakeholders are satisfied. The stakeholders who oppose the project or which is deliverables, we need to ensure that they are not negatively impacting the project outcomes. That is very important, right? The positive stakeholders or supportive stakeholders are being satisfied. Your customers are positive, right? Some, you need to ensure the customer satisfaction is, in green. Similarly, who is, if you are working with different vendor setup, say other vendor may not be, may not be interested in your deliverables and everything. So we need to ensure that in a multi-vendor setup, other vendors are not negatively impact your project outcomes, right? So these are the desired results or desired outcomes of to ensure the effective execution of this stakeholders performance domain. These are the 3 means of evaluating the your stakeholder performance domain, right? So let's understand a couple of key terms in the stakeholder management, right? What do you mean by stakeholder? A stakeholder can be an individual, it It can be a group, a team, or it can be an organization, right? That may affect or be affected by or perceive itself to be affected by a decision or an activity or an outcome of a project or a program or a portfolio. Right. So let's understand that whether you are running a portfolio or a program or project, right? Whatever you are running, if anyone, it can be individual or group or organization, if it's affected by your decision, they are affecting your decisions and activities and outcomes. That means they are coming under umbrella of a stakeholder, right? If you identify the stakeholder, what do you mean by stakeholder analysis, right? Yeah, method of systematically gathering, identifying them, and analyzing, you know, their interest and different aspects of their, people we identify and analyzing them in quantitative or qualitative manner. And throughout the project, we need to take into consideration, right? That's what I'm saying. This entire, the project in its entirety, throughout the project, you need to ensure that you systematically identify, gather, analyze that stakeholder information. It can be of the information can be of stake. We talk about that stakeholder aspects. What are the different aspects, right? So you can gather information about stakeholder different aspects of the stakeholders, either qualitative manner or quantitative manner, and you are doing it in a systematic way, right? So try to understand these key words. Method of systematically gathering, analyzing. It can be quantitative and qualitative, and determining the whose interest should be taken into account throughout the project. Right? You need to understand who are positively, influencing the outcomes of the project, who is negatively influencing the outcome of the project. So all those things called stakeholder analysis. So you need to understand who is the stakeholder and what do you mean by stakeholder analysis, right? So here we look at the example of the project stakeholders. We are giving a little bit example here. There are three, circles we're talking about. The inner circle is the project manager, the project management team, and the project team. The team who does, or the team that does the project execution, right? These people are responsible for implementing the project. They are responsible for the success of the project outcomes, right? So these are called, a core stakeholders: the project manager, the project management team, and the project team, right? These are the core team. These also, in the inner layer of the stakeholder, project stakeholders. In the next layer, we have someone like PMOs, steering committees, and governance bodies. Your executive leadership, your governance bodies like quality assurance teams, security teams. Your project management office or program management officer coming into the next cycle. So they might influence your decision. They'll set up the standards for you. You need to closely work with them, understand that you are following the company standards and policies and everything. The third circle, the outer circle, it deals with your external stakeholders, like someone like suppliers, customers, end users, and regulatory bodies. Right. So we need to differentiate between the customers and end user. Customer is the person who is kind of a project sponsor and who is more of taking a decision in terms of budgeting and resourcing and everything. End user is the person who is you actually is going to use an application or use the product what we are going to produce. They are going to consume the outcome of the project or product, whatever it is. So these guys are external to your organization. They have an influence to a project. Regulatory bodies, they are government policies and everything. If your particular industry regulatory bodies will influence you, in a certain way actually. So you need to understand, you need to identify that different types of stakeholders and different layers of stakeholders, right? How do we navigate stakeholder engagement? Right, they're talking about in a circle of 6 steps actually. So you need to start with the identification of stakeholder, and then understand them, analyze them, then prioritize them, engage them, and monitor it. So this is the way of navigating into stakeholder management. We will talk about in detail in the upcoming slide. So identifying, it's very, as we seen in the previous slide, try to go through the different layers of identify the stakeholders in each layer, right? So once you identify, try to understand and analyze them, right? What are the aspects in which you can want to gather the data is, understand the power of the stakeholder, you understand the power of a government and regulatory body, right? You understand the impact of, suppliers, or impact of customer, or impact of the PMO. So you need to understand, analyze all these aspects of different stakeholders, whatever whoever you identify. So you can understand power, impact, attitude, belief, expectations, degree of influence, the proximity to the project, how close they are, right? Your project team is very close to you, but suppliers, somewhat more, higher proximity than the inner core layer actually. The interest in the project, what is the interest of their project? So these are the 8 aspects in which you can try to analyze that stakeholders, right? So once you analyze the stakeholders, then you need to prioritize them. Who is important to, who is positively going to influence your project outcome, who are the negatives and everything. So once you prioritize, who is more important, who is less important, everything, then you start engaging them, right? What are the ways in which you can engage them? You can have a different types of communication, different ways of conversation, everything. So in a nutshell, right, there are two types of communication we deal with, stakeholders. One is verbal and written. In a formal verbal way, like project reviews and product demos and everything is for having a brainstorming sessions, having a informal conversation, ad hoc discussion. So it's a verbal type of communication. Similarly, you can write an email, social media, brief notes in an informal way, and you can send reports, project documents, configuration documents, a business case order in formal in nature. So similarly, we have three types of communication methods you can use for engaging your stakeholders. Push, one first method is push. You can sending an emails, status reports, all called push type of communication method. Pull type of method is putting a common forum, like having internet, putting the project information, lessons learned, risk analysis, everything in internet. People can go and search and look for the information. They can do it by themselves, right? And feedback surveys, all these kind of called pull type. So most of the time we'll use an interactive type of communication method. We'll engage in a phone call, we'll have a meetings, brainstorming. If you look at the Scrum, we'll have standard ceremonies of meeting actually, right? It can be of Scrum retrospective, it can be of Scrum demos and everything. All these things are called interactive sessions, interactive way of. Most of the 80% of the time, we try to be. It is better to be 80% of time in the interactive mode actually, right? Then how do we monitor? Once we engage them, and what is the next step is going to monitor it throughout the project. We have to ensure that we are identifying them, we are analyzing them, understanding their priority, right? All these things through that. Well, how do we monitor it? Periodically you need to understand, adding and removing a stakeholder, any stakeholders moved out of the project, or who is need to be come into the project, and the changes in the stakeholder aspects like power, interest or something, right? So project iteration reviews, the product reviews, these are the manner or way in which we can try to monitor the stakeholder influence, stakeholder aspects. Customer satisfaction surveys will give an level of engagement with the customer. Net promoter score will help you that relationship in a longer term. So these are the ways and means in which you can monitor your stakeholder performance domain, right? So the final step is, we discussed about in the what are the three major outcomes and desired results of a stakeholder performance domain. But how do we check each outcome? So if you want to check working relationship, positive relationship, how do I that? It can be observed. You need to understand the movement of the stakeholders and a continuum of engagement, and the relative level of satisfaction. Similarly, the agreement of the project objectives. The significant number of changes and modification will indicate that stakeholders are not aligned, right? That is one way of checking it. Similarly, the stakeholder behavior, understanding their behavior, who are supportive and who are not supportive. So we can do a lot of surveys and interviews, and having a risk register for each stakeholder, understand how they are influencing. This is the one way of checking the results. So hope you understand, hope you got a good idea about performance performance domain. So thank you very much.